Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Change, How to Turn Uncertainty into Opportunity. By Curtis Bateman, Marche Pleshette, Andy Cindrich, and Christi Phillips. Narrated by Curtis Bateman, Marche Pleshette, Andy Cindrich, and Christi Phillips. Publisher's note: this audiobook contains references to visuals present in the print and ebook editions of the book.
Forward. When I was a salesperson just starting out in my career, I serendipitously overheard Andy Cindrich, a co-author of the book you're about to listen to, facilitating a strategy execution session in the conference room next to my office. He said, "Here's the challenge leaders have. They've been thinking about a strategic decision for months before they breathe a word of it to anyone outside their core leadership team. They've looked at the data and the numbers, they've hashed out the risks and benefits, they've gotten themselves to the point where they're willing to bet a lot on it. Then they call their team or company together and announce the change. They're passionate about it, they're excited about it, and they might even communicate it effectively in the moment. They leave that presentation thinking, we're on our way. Then they metaphorically board a plane to fly to their next meeting. And when they reach cruising altitude going 600 miles an hour, they look out their window and can't believe how slowly people on the ground are moving. And when the leader lands, they immediately fire off emails saying, this is going to take the organization in an entirely new direction. What's the problem? What the leader failed to realize is that the people on the ground were tethered to that plane and were also moving 600 miles an hour, colliding with each other, trying to adjust to the new speed, and struggling to balance what they used to do with what they now need to do. And that's hard work. As Andy taught, you can develop a strategy that looks perfect on paper, but sooner or later, you'll be confronted with the responses and emotions of actual human beings who will implement the change. 2 decades later, when I was serving as president of FranklinCovey, we lived out this phenomenon as an organization. In our case, the change was a result of a proactive decision to upend our business model and undertake a massive digital transformation. Things weren't going poorly for us. In fact, we were already doing better as an organization than we had been doing in a long time. But our prescient CEO at the time, Bob Whitman, believed there was a better way to serve our customers by transitioning to a digital-first subscription model. And if that proved to be true, it was going to be much better for our clients and our organization, including our people. I was tasked with testing out the model with a subset of our salespeople and clients, and results quickly proved the idea was viable. But it was not an easy decision as a public company to transform our business. We needed to address literally everything: what we sold, the way we engaged clients, the financial model of the company, how we recognized revenue, how we accounted for our sales, how we went to market. In one way or another, it all had to change. As we tackled those challenges, we knew that if we couldn't capture the hearts and minds of the people, the change would fail. Our job as leaders was to help everyone in the organization see that while we didn't have answers to every question, ultimately this was going to be the right thing for them and for our customers. This is the very leadership challenge Andy was describing. Whether you're rolling out a strategic initiative or dealing with an externally imposed crisis, it's easy to forget that it's going to take your people more than one meeting or one presentation to get to the same level of comfort, buy-in, and excitement that you, as the leader, have for what's about to happen. We often think leadership is about having the big idea, but the idea is just the starting line. Leaders need a willingness to confront reality, adjust, get input, adjust again, and bring people along. That's the real work of leadership. During our own change initiative, we were no exception. Some of the most influential opinion leaders in the company said, I don't want to do this. I've been successfully doing my job for 2 decades, and you're going to come in and mess it all up. I know because they called me directly. As an organization, we were in and out of what this book calls the zone of disruption frequently, sometimes multiple times a day. And at the same time, we benefited from having a culture filled with incredible people who were already steeped in the principles and practices of resilience, trust, and collaboration, from the 7 habits of highly effective people, the speed of trust, and other bodies of work that are central to what we bring to the world. As a result, our cultural strength gave us a leg up on the change, and we pushed through to the zone of innovation relatively quickly, and the benefits of the change began to materialize. We had all kinds of fits and starts, and thankfully, our clients hung in there with us. Our people recalibrated and innovated in ways we couldn't have foreseen at the beginning. Most importantly, our clients, people, and investors were truly better served as we began to form deeper and longer-term partnerships with our clients and engage with them in more lasting and comprehensive ways. So why FranklinCovey and why this book? Why listen to us after the millions of gallons of ink that have been spilled on the topic of leadership and organizational change? Fundamentally, it's because we believe that we have a unique understanding of the underlying principles, practices, and behaviors that drive effective behavior change at scale. And we know how to enable organizations to marshal all that human energy to get aligned and rolling in the same direction in support of the strategies the organization needs to achieve. This is something we've been doing for 40 years. We are the behavior change company, and at its core, every strategic initiative, every change you go through, is accomplished through a change in human behavior. We're checking the box that you've come up with a brilliant plan, whether it's to achieve better results or to deal with a change you never asked for. But that great plan will live or die based on what the people in your organization or team do, whether they buy in or not, whether they go on the journey or not, whether they reinvent themselves and the way they work to make it happen or not. As my friend Andy pointed out, having a great idea puts you at the starting line. The real work of leadership is what you do next.
Introduction. When Mick Jagger opened the door, Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones drummer, punched him in the face so hard he fell flat on the table behind him. The usually mild-mannered Watts then calmly turned around and walked back to his hotel room. Why such an act of aggression? Jagger may have been one of the greatest rock and roll frontmen of all time, but he miscalculated the emotions of change. He hadn't learned, or had forgotten, that unwanted and unexpected change can tap into our most primal, fight-or-flight instincts. Even a calm, unflappable English drummer could lash out, and did, when the ego-driven Jagger announced he'd negotiated a huge deal for himself with a slew of solo albums to follow. That act of betrayal, followed by a late-night harassing phone call from Jagger, was more change than Charlie Watts could take. A knock on the door was followed by a right hook, and Jagger fell into a platter of smoked salmon and nearly out of the hotel window. The Rolling Stones patched things up and continued their streak of best-selling hits. While we're not advocating Charlie Watts' choice in handling the situation, we recognize it would be a mistake to underestimate how humans are wired to react when faced with the threat of change. We've written this book to provide leaders with the mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets to lead their teams from simply reacting to change to opting in and taking ownership of it. In the chapters to come, we'll present a framework for how change unfolds as a predictable process and how leaders can increase their team's capacity to both implement and leverage the benefits of change. After all, FranklinCovey's mission of enabling greatness in people and organizations everywhere is essentially a mission about change. Whether we're developing exceptional leaders, instilling the habits of effectiveness, building an inclusive and high-trust culture, or providing a common execution framework tied to wildly important goals, change is at the heart of how people live, work, and achieve individual and collective great purposes. As 4 authors, we're unabashed about our passion for and expertise in helping clients successfully navigate change. It begins with the recognition that the most effective change leaders choose to invest their time in their people over following a process. Leaders who begin with this mindset can more easily move beyond rote change management practices to building increased change capabilities in those they lead. Over the past 4 decades, we've vetted our framework by working in the trenches with executives, mid-level leaders, and frontline employees to support various forms of change across numerous industries. The topic of change has helped shape the focus of our professional lives, and we've gathered more than a few stories along the way. Change is a platform for helping others. It all began on a trip through Eastern Europe in the late 90s. I was working with one of our business partners, and we were discussing the need for individuals, organizations, and teams to have more tools and best practices when it came to change. We realized people needed a way to see the change journey like a map, so they'd know where they were and what was ahead. With my business partners, I jumped to the whiteboard and sketched the initial vision for what later became FranklinCovey's change model. I know, nerd alert. who jumps to a whiteboard to draw a modified J-curve. Together, we sketched several years' worth of clients' successes and failures and teased out the common patterns that stalled or accelerated their progress during their change trajectories. What emerged over years of diligent study, reflection, and recalibration was a change model. My experienced and talented co-authors and I will present and explore in this book. Prior to our whiteboard masterpiece, I'd spent the first dozen years of my career working in software and had the opportunity to collaborate with publishers all over the world. I was working at a boutique tech startup, and after landing our first big international client, I moved to Europe to ensure a successful implementation of our solution. We built a team of consultants, trainers, technical specialists, and salespeople. The software we sold to publishers became the backbone of their operation, including customer service, finance, and revenue recognition, marketing, and fulfillment. Consulting with clients to implement our technology put me on the front row of large organizational change. Oh yeah, and very much on the front row of personal change as well, as my wife and I uprooted our family and moved halfway around the world. Best decision we ever made, and we've done it multiple times since. In the ensuing 20 years, I've had the privilege of being involved in many significant change initiatives across complicated systems, technologies, and processes. And what I really learned is that change is fundamentally about people. This people-first insight eventually led me to the world's most trusted leadership company, FranklinCovey. I saw an opportunity to move our experience and ongoing change work into an organization with a much bigger stage, one with the potential to help everyone find more success with change. And that's a why that drives me to this day.
Change promotes growth. One of my favorite adages in life is, stop looking at your past. It's not where you're headed. I've always felt a bit uncomfortable and sometimes even paralyzed at the onset of change until I first gained clarity about why I'm in it. Second, understand what I can and can't control about it. And third, make clear decisions about how I will move forward. What I've found over time is that I'm rarely guaranteed success at the outset of a new venture. But I've learned that success in any undertaking is far more promising when there's a planned process, a support system, and a focused and positive mindset for the journey. My passion for people led me to the most fitting careers, professional development and personal coaching. They have given me the opportunity to support others in growth, improvement, and the accomplishment of goals. For someone who is so resistant to change personally, it's ironic that I found myself essentially in the business of change. In the most rewarding way, my career has not only helped others, but also helped me to consistently grow, improve, and reach higher goals myself. While crisscrossing the world for several decades, working with FranklinCovey's diverse client base, I've become certain that change is a process of adjusting to something different or new and causes many of us to be fearful. And that's normal for all of us at some level. It's when fear hijacks our confidence and paralyzes our individual momentum that the potential upside of change falls short. This book is designed to help you as a leader guide your team past such fear and embrace the opportunities that await. My greatest change personally came when I was 24 and I lost my father to a fatal car accident. I saw my dad, as many daughters do, as the greatest. He was such a source of wisdom, provision, encouragement, thoughtful conversation, and joy. I counted on him for almost everything. He taught me about life, business, and greatness, but I wasn't deeply listening to the responsibility part of our conversations because I subconsciously thought he'd be there all my life. The first several months without him were empty, emptier and more hopeless than I'd ever experienced. While going through the grieving process, I had to decide to accept both the loss and the opportunity to grow. I took on the things he'd originally done for me, often having no idea what I was doing with some of the business matters, but I learned. I became more self-sufficient and wiser in handling personal issues as well. Where I would ordinarily have called him to ask advice about a relationship or a big decision, I began to test the wisdom of my own insights and move through the natural fear of the massive loss in my life. I became more independent and found I was far more capable than I'd imagined I could be. The comfort of his presence in my life had created such a safe place, I hadn't leaned into the potential of my full growth. I would rather have had a different kind of growth spurt than losing my dad, but it was a pivotal point of enlightenment for me about change. Even now, I still miss him, but he would be so proud of the empowered and mature woman I've become. Among those of my brilliant co-authors, my voice throughout the book is one that reminds us of the human spirit that is so much a part of change. Whether our change is personal, professional, organizational, or societal, it's our sense of self, our identity, our character that gets refined through the change process.
Change can spur greatness. As a 29-year-old high school principal with some staff who had taught longer than I'd been alive, I led an amazing group of teachers, coaches, and students in turning our struggling school around. In just a 3-year period, we were able to change the culture, improve academic performance, and establish winning traditions in several sports. At the outset, I knew I had to shake things up. People were just too comfortable with the way things had always been at the school. We disrupted everything from the bell schedule and homecoming traditions to the way we collected gate receipts at football games and how the staff interacted with students. I also helped 2 teachers find opportunities more suited to their skill sets. That didn't sit well with the teachers union, which ultimately pressured the school board to move me out, known to the rest of the world as getting sacked. They didn't fire me outright, but moved me into a new role where I split my time between 2 school districts, serving as a school community resource director before moving back into the classroom and working with at-risk students. A reduction in force in the spring of my 5th year left me with a newborn baby, with a house under construction, and without a job, too late in the year to find another as a school administrator, so I had to reinvent myself fast. I pivoted to instructional design, training development, editing, and even web development and search engine optimization. My biggest client was FranklinCovey, and after a series of serendipitous events, I ended up as a full-time FranklinCovey consultant, helping clients with strategy execution, leadership development, and personal effectiveness. This gut-wrenching, unanticipated, and unwanted change is one of the best things that ever happened to me. In my 3,000-plus days of engagements as a FranklinCovey consultant, I've seen the pain of people who get stuck, whether from a new boss, the grief that follows the untimely death of a loved one, a faith crisis, the bitterness of divorce, an empty nest, or the struggle of navigating organizational change. I've seen my children's friends get stuck after high school graduation, and I've seen clients get stuck when unanticipated change throws them off their game plans. If you've noticed a theme, it's getting stuck. Organizations and smart, well-educated, talented leaders and individual contributors all get stuck in change. My personal mission calls me to help people get unstuck, to reinvent themselves in the face of adversity, and to find their own greatness. This often means experiencing unanticipated value and joy from change. I recognize that change is essential to progress, whether as an individual, in a marriage or partnership, in a business, in school, as a community, as a society, or even collectively as stewards of this world.
Change is universal and predictable. Change is probably the main theme of my personal life, and it very easily has become a theme of my professional life. When I was 8 years old, my parents came to me and my siblings and told us that they were moving our family to Africa from Texas. But before we got to Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, we had to move to Georgia for 6 months, then France for another 6 months. I did not like any of that, but it didn't matter. It all happened anyway. I eventually came to love moving from one place to another and even missed the changes when my family settled back in Texas. Change, in the form of living in unfamiliar places, had opened me to new people, new learnings, and new paradigms. I eventually learned that I could choose to embrace such change or resist. I believe this insight gave me an edge that other people my age, without the benefit of such drastic and early change in their lives, simply didn't have. For the last 15 years of my professional life, I have functioned as a change agent both formally and informally. I helped lead a large healthcare organization through the implementation of an electronic medical records, EMR, system, an experience both delightful and hard. I also took 10 long years to complete a dissertation on employee engagement. It, too, was a change experience filled with both joy and pain. Shortly, Curtis is going to introduce you to a parable about a ship, its crew, and their perilous river journey. When it comes to change, the waterfall in this parable represents the initial disruption of change. And we stress the inevitability of plunging over the river's edge, whether accidental, imposed, or chosen, just as I was taken over such a change waterfall early in my life. As a listener, you may find that the waterfall and resulting journey works for you as a metaphor, particularly if you can envision a change story as a fantastical adventure. Or the whimsical waterfall may be difficult or challenging if you prefer more literal translations of hard-hitting business-like change. The thing that is common about the parable you'll find in Chapter 1 is that, for nearly all of us, it represents the emotional plummet and heightening chaos, personal or professional, slight or significant, that change brings. My goal in giving you this early spoiler is to set you up, regardless of which kind of literary preferences you have or what kind of listener you are, so you can, in the best tradition of any useful parable, ascribe to the waterfall the meaning that flows from your life, experiences, culture, context, and more. In other words, make it yours. This book emphasizes the people side of change, which, thanks to the work on grief, the emotional reactions to loss, certainly a kind of change, presented by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the 1980s, we understand is universal and predictable. And I know that FranklinCovey isn't the first player in the sandbox to talk about the people side of change, but we've built upon that foundation to offer a simple and relatable model to reconceptualize how to self-manage, to take others through change, and maybe even learn to enjoy the ride.
We've each come to change through a different lens. Curtis is a change expert with over 2 decades of working both at the highest levels and in the trenches. Marche is a professional development consultant who has coached hundreds of leaders through personal and professional change. Andy is a leadership and effectiveness expert and an accomplished change practitioner who provides consulting services to executives and organizations. And Christi is a PhD in human resources development who has served as the lead change agent for an immensely complex healthcare change initiative, among other change-related projects. We've experienced change from many perspectives, across diverse organizations, and from all parts of the globe, and our collective experience has validated 2 premises we'll explore further in this book. First, change follows a pattern, and leaders can benefit greatly from a framework we call the change model. And second, because change is always a human endeavor, the most effective change leaders prioritize the needs of their people over strict adherence to a process. The promise of this book is that it will teach you, as a leader, how to turn the uncertainty of change into opportunity and build your team's capacity to move through current and future changes more effectively. That may feel like a daunting challenge, especially if you're in the middle of a change disruption. But take heart. The perfect antidote to change's complexity is a model that is clear and simple to understand. And so, by way of introduction, let's start with our parable. Chapter 1. Who Rocked the Boat? A Change Parable. Wait, what? A parable? As Christi mentioned in her introduction, we're going to start with a parable about a boat and its crew on a fantastical journey, one that forces them to adapt through disruptive change. This story was previously released as an illustrated book titled Who Rocked the Boat? A story about navigating the inevitability of change. We've included the story here to unpack and explore it through the lens of leadership. We strongly feel that it brings to life profound principles and practices that can change the trajectory of one's career, levels of contribution, legacy, or even an entire organization. So, why a parable? Let me quote from Howard Schultz, the editor of a collection of 19th and 20th century parables called Imperial Messages. The modern parable, like its predecessor, the ancient scriptural parable, is a brief story infused with a moral dimension. Meaning does not lie exposed on the surface, but submerged, waits for the reader who has ears to hear the message. And that's our invitation to you, to consider your own change journey, and consider what meaning you might find beneath the surface as you join our captain and crew on their voyage. One last note. We gave the parable the somewhat ironic title of Who Rocked the Boat, as this is often the first reaction in the face of unexpected change. Whose fault is this? This can be especially true for new leaders and teams facing daunting change for the first time. So let's begin with a text exchange between such a leader and a mentor they trust. A leader's dilemma. Help! Company just announced a big change. My team's right in the middle of it all. Yikes! I've never led a team through this kind of thing before. What do I do? Where do I start? Breathe. You've got this. Easy for you to say, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm glad you messaged. This is why you asked me to be your mentor. Moments like this, right? Right. Advice? I just sent you a whimsical story about change. Read it, then text me when you're done. Part 1. The River Routine. There once was a captain and crew who set off in their fanciful ship, Results. They had been tasked with delivering their cargo past the mountain, where their port of call awaited. The crew was content, perhaps even a little bored. As Results moved at a slow but predictable pace, everyone expected a smooth journey. The waterway was gentle, the scenery pleasant, and the skies clear and comforting. The crew had worked together for some time and knew each other well. Move was the engineer, who kept their steam engines stoked and running. Minimize served as the chief mate and oversaw the cargo. Resist, the second mate, was responsible for ship and crew safety. Wait was a deckhand who did a little bit of everything. And finally, Quits and Quit were twins who took turns piloting the ship down the river. They all served under the captain, who was responsible for everything related to Results and her crew. I prefer gentle rivers like this one, Wait said to the others. They make for an easy trip, Minimize added. And it does give us some time to run drills, Move said. Always an endless fountain of energy. You know, sharpen our skills and learn something new. Resist raised an eyebrow in response. Do more work for the same pay? Yeah, I'll take a pass. Same here, Quits called down from the helm. Don't stress yourselves out. This trip will be as smooth as silk. True, Quit agreed. Smooth as silk when I'm at the helm. They all laughed at Quit's overconfidence. But river journeys, like life, often unfold in surprising ways. In the distance, the sound of a muffled roar rose above the chug of Results' steam-powered engines. Noticing the river moving faster and faster, the captain knew what it likely meant. Waterfall ahead! But before they could swing the boat around, the swift current pulled them into a rushing, churning rapid. All hands man the boat, the captain exclaimed, issuing the traditional order for the crew to don their life jackets and prepare for the unknown. Waterfall ahead! But not every crew member reacted in the same way. Move, who loved the excitement of a new adventure, grabbed a shovel and began heaping coal into the boilers. The quicker we get to the waterfall, the more exciting and fast our trip will be. Move loved to race ahead and embrace the thrill of the ride. Minimize, who wanted to know only what was expected and to do as little as possible, was cautious not to overthink or expend more energy than necessary. Is it really a waterfall? Let's not be doing anything more than we have to, said Minimize, looking up from reviewing the cargo manifest. Wait, noted the captain's warning but remained in place. I've been fooled by such noises before. Best to hold off and see what happens. Wait said, monitoring the rest of the crew and watching how they reacted before making a move. Resist believed they should refuse to go further. A waterfall could easily destroy Results. Resist shouted to the others, We must fight against the pull of the current. Help me throw the anchor overboard. But the captain intervened. They were moving too fast, and if the anchor caught, it would capsize the ship. Quits and Quit had other ideas. Quits, thinking the jungle a better alternative to the waterfall, shouted, Good luck to you, but I'm out of here. Then Quits jumped overboard and swam for shore. Quit, on the other hand, wanted out but wasn't ready to abandon the ship or crew just yet. After all, who knew if the jungle was any less dangerous than the waterfall? So Quit stepped away from the helm, grabbed the rail, and said, No use steering now. The captain grabbed the wheel and guided Results toward the precipice ahead. Part 2. Down the Waterfall. The ship bounced and listed as it neared the crest of the waterfall. Awash in the roar of the falls, the spray of the water, and the rush of the wind, the crew was gripped by an onslaught of emotions as they plummeted. I told you this would happen. We're goners, Quit shouted above the fray. We should have dropped the anchor, Resist exclaimed. Oh my, Wait cried out, clinging to...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?